Chapter 21, PACS Readiness. As we've talked about previously, there are various reasons for radiology departments to make the change to implement PACS in their organization, such as having a film-based system with high inefficiency and the need for teleradiology, which is nearly impossible without a PACS. We've also said that this decision needs to be a thorough, well thought out decision and should be thought about in depth before making the leap. The first step in the PACS process is to assess your facility, especially the major interactions between the radiology department and other departments. Essentially, we are asking ourselves, where are we now with our facility? A few different things that you need to look at are, to start out, how many studies and of what kinds do we have? You can usually find this information in departmental logs, billing sheets, or the RIS. You need to look at the number of reports generated in various time periods, so per day, per week, and so on. You need to estimate the growth rate of your facility. Will you be growing in the next year or so? This is usually necessary to see the expansions of your site in the future to determine your PACS needs. Where are studies read? Are they read on site, or are film images moved from location to location via a courier? This is important in estimating the necessary network capacity that is needed for PACS. So next, you have to think about the workflow component, which is also answering the where are we now question of the process. You need to break down your current workflow process into different components. A simple way to think about workflow steps is that each step has some sort of input, a task performed on the input, and some sort of output based on the task performed. Some common methods for analyzing the workflow process is to follow something. So follow various things and see where they go through the process. An example would be follow a patient, track them through the process. Another common method to analyzing the workflow process is to brainstorm. So gather personnel and ask them to describe in detail what they do, and also to simply hire a consultant to do the work. Just know that this is costly. You will also need to do an inventory of your equipment when preparing for PACS readiness, since the PACS will need to acquire images from your equipment, from your modalities. When looking at this, you need to know how many studies are done on each piece of equipment per day, and when the equipment will need to be replaced. Will it be time for replacement when PACS is ready to be implemented? This is something that you might want to do with the PACS implementation. You might want to buy some new equipment. Next, you need to think about your system's RIS. Remember, the RIS and the PACS need to have seamless interoperability. Many vendors offer systems that have a RIS and PACS all in one. This makes for a very smooth operation. If you already have a RIS, you need to discuss in depth the details of your RIS with any potential PACS vendors that you are considering, just so you can understand how their PACS will function with your RIS. So the Integrating Healthcare Enterprise effort was first started by RSNA and also the Health Information Management Systems Society, the HIMSS, with the goal of using existing DICOM and HL7 standards to support communication between PACS and other healthcare information systems. IHE has defined a set of profiles, which we spoke about before, and they are descriptions of the ways these DICOM and HL7 standards are supposed to be used in the clinical scenarios. Is your department implementing these profiles? This is something you need to look at within your facility. You also have to think about if your department utilizes any advanced visualization techniques. So do you have techs or RADs that use specific workstations to look at thin slice CT images, 3D and 4D ultrasounds, or volumetric MR images? In a non-PACS environment, these workstations are a standalone computer, but in the PACS world, many thin client advanced visualization systems may be needed. Also, can the proposed PACS system you are looking at handle the transmission of these large images? Or will you need more network bandwidth than what you had originally thought? Will teleradiology be something your department may need to use? Will any RADs be reading at home or at different offsites where they will need to access images? If so, you will need to get this set up, as well as ensuring IT support is available to assist with the image transition and that the radiologists get trained on how to read off-site. You will also need to assess your desktop computer inventory. Will you need to use more thin client computers to support PACS? An inventory of PCs, their types, location, and basic software should be a part of your PACS readiness preparation. Next, it is important to look at your IT infrastructure. Do you have a communications network in place? If so, will you need to increase the bandwidth and connectivity when you implement your PACS? Most PACS require a larger bandwidth. You need to review personnel as a step in the PACS readiness process as well. Vendors will often suggest a specific personnel setup that you may want to consider for your department if getting to PACS is new to you. But you certainly do not have to go with the route that they suggest. You can do your own thing. However, a PACS manager is usually a necessity. This is someone who is already serving as a go-to for systems already in place, like teleradiology, mini PACS, or RIS. If you have an IT manager, but they aren't necessarily committed to radiology or even familiar with imaging, then it is important to think about implementing a PACS manager to serve as a kind of dedicated IT personnel for radiology. You could have a modality manager. Sometimes it is helpful if your facility can bring on a modality manager. Vendors have sometimes frequent upgrades and updates to their system and to different modalities. And the modality manager can be someone who takes care of all of the troubleshooting regarding PACS and these modality upgrades. I mean, how many times have you been at work if you were a rad tech and you got this quote unquote upgrade overnight, and then you're the first person to work with the upgrade, and you are actually seeing bugs and kinks in the system, not upgrades. A modality manager would take care of this. So if you are a multi-site facility, just remember that you may require operations staff at each site, so at each offsite, to take care of any PACS operations at that specific site. Switching from a film-based system to a fully functional PACS system is a huge change for a site. Part of the PACS readiness is to examine the problems that will drive change management, which is simply a systematic approach to deal with change. Oftentimes, if you don't consider this important step in the PACS readiness process, you will end up with bigger headaches once PACS is actually implemented. So it's important to think about it beforehand. Let's face it, PACS is a big change to any department. Training plans, they can be very hard to implement because there are many people who need to be involved and they all have different schedules. It's always difficult to train in clinical areas due to each different area's schedule. You should determine any available space and any space you'll need for the training and facilities that need trained before you develop the request for proposal preparation, so you can tell the vendor exactly what to expect and what obstacles they may run into. A train the trainers approach is helpful since it is rare that all personnel will be able to be trained at once. The larger the organization you are, the smaller chance that training will be able to be done all at once. So you might want to look at the train the trainers approach. Record keeping is important to maintain the history of previously implemented systems, so you can have an idea of what hurdles to overcome when implementing a PACS. Make sure you keep existing records throughout your PACS implementation so you can make sure your vendor is adhering to all the terms of the service agreement. This is also important so you can spot any trouble areas, such as maybe one specific workstation keeps having problems, then you may want to just go ahead and replace it. Getting help. An external consultant may be necessary to hire, but remember, you'll have to spend some time catching the consultant up to speed on your PACS plan and also explaining the existing workflow of the department to him or her.